announcement about tours and our Wednesday Chautauqua seminar. I want to let you know that next Sunday's afternoon 1:30 presentation will be by David Blank. David is well known to many Lakesiders. He is just coming off a double term on the Lakeside Association Board of Trustees, most recently as the treasurer. But I specifically asked David, and I think he may have regretted, but he said yes to my request that he do a presentation about Reverend Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, who spoke here at Lakeside several times, as did his wife. And there are many Lakeside connections. Peale's mother was involved with the Mission Society work here at Lakeside. And he's graciously agreed to do that. It's going to be a very informative presentation, and he is going to share 4 minutes of an audio tape, the old cassette tapes, of when Mrs. Peale was here at the age of 92 and gave the Sunday sermon in the auditorium, in which she relates how she met Dr. Peale and the start of their marriage together. So that will be next Sunday, 1:30 here in this space. Please join us. Now, I frequently take on my old teacher hat and give people pop quizzes at the beginning of seminars in Lakeside, just so you can feel good about what you learned in the hour. So this is a pop quiz. You will share the results with no one other than maybe the person sitting next to you if you want. If you want to have little conversations and try to help each other, you know, that's okay in this classroom. So just write the numbers down and see if you can answer 1 or 2 of these before we start. Oh, yes, Dakota, will you drop off the lights, please? All of them.
Is that okay?
Thank you. Everybody, can you see that now? Okay, I'll read them. This is I tried to get it all on one slide. 1, what percentage of cottages have a name in the Lakeside LPO directory for 2017? What percentage? More than 60%? Approximately 45%? Or approximately 30%? How many cottages have names? 2, what color appears most often in cottage names? The color. Red, orange, yellow, green. Name 1 of 2 of the most common nouns that appear in cottage names in Lakeside. Not the word cottage or house or haven, sorry. Something different than that. Identify 1 name of a book referenced in a cottage name. A book. Adult or child. Identify the title of 1 song referenced in a cottage name. Now, every north-south avenue except 3 of them have at least 1 cottage on that street named after the avenue. So the question number 6 is, there are 2 of the avenues where that group of homeowners have really excelled in using the cottage name, or using the avenue name. So what is 1 of those streets? It is not Laurel. I just picked that. It's not Jasmine. So I just narrowed it down by 2. Yeah, I'm an eraser. Okay, identify 1 of the 3 north-south avenues that has not a single name of that avenue on any of the cottages. And there's an opportunity for those of you who haven't yet identified a cottage name. If you live on one of those 3, you could. Okay, There are 3 streets or avenues that run north-south that no cottage has that name in it. Like there's a cottage called Slowpoke on Oak.
Right.
There's a cottage called Oaken. There's a cottage called the Oak Cottage. So there are 3 on Oak. But there... Okay. Identify the year, this is just a random guess, but see how close you can come. For most of you it'll be a random guess, it would be for me. Identify the year the cottage names first appeared in the LPO directory. People love looking at the cottage names. When did they first appear in the cottage directory? When the first directory was published, that would have been about 1905. And the last 9 and 10 identify 2 of 5 cottages in Lakeside that have had the same name continuously for more than 100 years. There are 5 of them. See if you can name 2. Okay, we ready to roll now? Okay. What's in a cottage name? Well, I was so appreciative of the fact that the Grinleys had named their cottage Liberty, especially since this is July 2nd. I thought how appropriate to start with that very first slide of a cottage name on this July 4th weekend. So, how did the cottage get its name? Ted and Dee bought this particular cottage in 1974. They had owned the cottage behind it, didn't give that one a name, gave this one the name of Liberty. But there's a reason that has nothing to do with any patriotic connection in terms of how it got its name, much to my surprise. There's a map of Indiana there. Does anybody know where that little red dot is, what that might be connected to? Pardon?
Liberty County?
It's not Liberty County, but Liberty, Indiana is in that county. And Ted and Dee Grinley, she gave me permission to share this story. Ted and Dee Grinley eloped when Ted was on Liberty from the Marines, and they drove from Ohio across the border into Indiana to Liberty, Indiana, where they were married. So much for the patriotic reason for the name. Okay, cottage names with longevity. 5 for more than 100 years. In order, the oldest is Rockledge, named in 1882 when it was built by Reverend Adam C. Barnes with 18 rooms and a basement. That name has been retained by 6 subsequent owners. 2 the current owners, Jim and Betty Jane Young, who've had the cottage since 1993. You see one of the very early pictures of Rockledge there on the left side. Keystone, it was named in 1888 by Mary Yoder, who ran a guest house there until her death in 1930. And there is a picture of the Keystone. You can barely make out the name. Before the porches were enclosed, but a group of women in their long dresses sitting on the porch of Keystone. It was owned and operated by the Philibom family for almost 70 years. They retained the name, and then so did Elaine Leffert, who's been the current owner since 2001. So the Keystone is now in its 130th season. The Idlewild. This was named circa 1906 by Alice B. Searles of Tiffin, who operated it as a guest house. After Alice's death, her twin daughters, Clara and Ella, operated the guest house until they were physically no longer able to do that, 1924 to 77. They both died around the age of 100. And we have interesting articles about the 2 of them. This is a sign from ownership period of the Searles, and on the back of it, it has their name written July 22nd, 1900 something. But when the current owners, the Barra's family, was cleaning some things out, they gave this to the Heritage Society to keep, since they weren't going to use it anymore at Idlewild. But that's an idea for people in terms of if you have a sign, put the date on the back at which you have named your cottage, or if you're replacing a sign because the old one, say sign number 2 and date it. You see that all of the owners have been long-term owners running a guest house, which is no easy task to do. Another interesting long-term name is Green Gables. We don't know exactly when it was named, other than it was prior to 1910. I don't know if the fact that Lucy Maud Montgomery's 1908 novel, Anne of Green Gables, that was so successful, had an influence on the naming of it, but it was a boarding house operated by two sisters, again, Mary and Alice Cook. When it became the Lakeside Women's Clubhouse in 1928, the name was retained, and I can't imagine that we would ever consider anything else as the name for that building. In terms of an individual cottage, the oldest name is that of Homeport, which is located on Sycamore, was named in 1914 by William Monette, who was serving in the Navy from 1901 to 1921. This was a house that was originally the home of W.W. Ross, whose son created then built the Ross cottages in East Lakeside. The Monette brothers sailed the Great Lakes, so Homeport was selected as a place where they came to for R&R. And this house remains in the same family since it was purchased in 1914. Mary Stewart, we've had a couple of notes from Mary from the last 2 years. Mary no longer has the energy and the strength to come to Lakeside, but her family, at this point anyway, continues to maintain ownership of it. We dropped down 25 years longevity of cottage names for 75 to 99 years. Leland is one. Most of you in recent years would know it as the Caldwell home at the corner of 3rd and, is it Lynn? This was Vine, thank you. This was named in 1920 by Thomas and Alma Dolan. They did operate it as a guest house for some of the time. I am unable to determine where the Lee came from. It doesn't reflect middle names or a son's name, so that's a mystery, but it has remained unchanged through the next 4 owners. And you can see there is a sign, Leland, there on the middle of the porch. This was a pretend wedding ceremony, a children's wedding ceremony for the fun of it. I think sponsored by the Lakeside Women's Club. I don't know why we were promoting marriage of children this young in 1940, but that's what the photo is taken from. It's to show you that the sign was there in 1940. Another one in this category is the Bright Cottage, currently owned by Bonnie and Jim Hikes. Bonnie is the granddaughter of Harry E. Bright, who purchased the cottage in 1922. This is interesting in terms of dates that appear on cottage signs. You don't know just at looking at dates unless it says EST established, then you can pretty well determine it was established by the family who named it that. This, in fact, many of the cottages have a date that refers to when that cottage was built. So there's a mixture of both. The Abigail. The name was originally once it became a public tea room, it was called the Mayflower. It was renamed the Abigail in 1933 by Abigail Dudley Spaulding, who was the manager of the tea room. She was not the owner of the building, but the manager. She renamed it, and then that name has stuck. As all of you know, this former tea room was sold at public auction here in Lakeside in April of 2010. Some of you in this room may have memorabilia from that auction. It underwent historic renovation to take it back to the appearance of its two original cottages. The Abigail sold this spring, and the couple who bought it with young children have been in at the Lakeside archives, and it appears to me from my conversation that they are going to retain the name of the Abigail Cottage, for which we are all grateful. The one next door, the Blaine, which was an original name there, to my knowledge does not have an exterior sign. It's just called the Blaine, giving new potential owners the chance to rename it anything they wish to, but its historic name was the Blaine.